All right, so today we're covering triangle congruence. If you look at these two triangles in the upper right-hand corner, these two triangles are congruent. So notice that they have a matching side here, congruent side, so those two lengths are the same. They have a congruent side here and here, and they also have a congruent side here and here. And then they also have three congruent angles. So they have congruent angles here and here. They have congruent angles here and here. And they have congruent angles here and here. So those two triangles are congruent because they have congruent sides and congruent angles. So to be able to prove that two triangles are congruent, we don't have to show that every single side is congruent and every single angle is congruent. We can use these possibilities down here. So if we show that three sides are congruent, then the two triangles are totally congruent. If we can show that a side, angle, and side are congruent, then the two triangles are congruent. If we can show that an angle, a side, and an angle are congruent, then the two triangles are congruent. And if we can show an angle, and a side are congruent, then the two triangles are congruent. So here are some different situations, and we're going to talk about whether the two triangles that are shown are congruent or not congruent. So let's look at number one. In number one, it shows that there definitely is a side in each triangle that's congruent. So here and here. Now also notice that they share a side. So they share this side. And so that side is congruent from one triangle to the other. And then they also show that two angles are congruent. So this angle and this angle are congruent. So if we look at what we have, we kind of read the triangle. We start with one of the congruences. So if I start up here with this side that's congruent, I go, okay, so there's a side congruent, there's another side congruent, and then there's an angle congruent. So I would read side, side, angle. Now, if you notice in the options, there is no side, side, angle. So we could not say that these two triangles are congruent. So not congruent. If we go to number two, on number two, it shows us that an angle is congruent. They share this side, and then there's another angle that's congruent. So it goes angle, side, angle. If we look at our list, angle, side, angle is definitely an option. So we can say that yes, these two triangles are congruent. All right, let's look at the third one here. If we look at number three, we're shown that these two sides are congruent. We're shown that these two sides are congruent. And we know that since they share that side in the middle, these two sides are congruent. So here we have side, side, side. And that's one of our options. So yes, we can say that these two triangles are congruent. Moving on to number four. So in number four, these two angles are congruent. And these two sides are congruent. And then based on what we learned about vertical angles, notice that we have vertical angles here. So those two angles, we know from the definition of vertical angles, are congruent. So we have angles that are congruent, sides, angles. So we go angle, side, angle. And if you look at your list, angle, side, angle is definitely proves congruence between two triangles. So yes, these two triangles are congruent. All right, if we go down to number 5, we see that these two sides are congruent, and we see that these two angles are congruent. Doesn't show us any other congruent, and we don't have anything with just two options, a side and an angle. So no, these are not congruent. All right, number 6. In number 6, these two angles are congruent. They're both 90-degree angles. These two sides are congruent. And then again, we have vertical angles here, so we know these two angles are congruent. So we would say angle, side, angle. And that's definitely an option. So these two triangles are congruent. Remember, that means that each side is congruent with another side in the other triangle, and each angle is congruent with another angle in the triangle. All right. If we go down to number 9, we see that two sides are congruent, and two angles are congruent. If we read them, we would start maybe with, over here, side, angle, side. So side, angle, side. Look up at your list. That is on your list. So we can say, yes, these two angles or triangles are congruent. All right, and then last one here in the lower right, we see that these two sides are congruent. We see that these two angles are congruent, and we see that these two angles are congruent. So if we read those, we could say angle, angle, side. And if you look at your list, angle, angle, side is on the list. And so, yes, we can say that these two triangles are congruent. So email me if you have any questions.